Hello, my esteemed graduate school colleagues and Professor Harper. I opted to make a video related to my research paper, in part inspired by Michelle's awesome video, and also pretty tired of writing stuff, and I'm sure you all are tired of reading at this point in the semester. So one less thing to read, I guess. My topic for my paper was trauma in middle childhood age 6 to 12, thereabouts. So first, defining trauma I found was a little bit tricky, and the definition I decided upon really has two parts to it. The first part is experiencing what we can call a potentially traumatic event, which is some sort of circumstance that is unusual and highly impactful on one's nervous system, body, and psyche. So something that can be terrifying, upsetting, life-threatening, and so forth. So that's the first part. So just experiencing that doesn't necessarily result in traumatic stress or long-lasting impacts on one. So the second part of the definition I'm going with for trauma in middle childhood and trauma just in general is that experience has to cause lasting impacts on the individual, psychologically, physically, and or emotionally. So when you have those two parts, then that's trauma. You've experienced something, and then it is having lasting impacts on you. So we all watched that awesome YouTube talk by Dr. Harris, which relates a lot to my paper and topic, namely in that showing that by experiencing adverse childhood experiences, which are synonymous with potentially traumatic events, that has can have very lasting effects on an individual through childhood, but then through their whole life, impacting them on many different levels. Right, we all learned that. Not just psychologically, but deeply physiologically, where childhood experiences of trauma correlate to increases in all sorts of physical diseases: heart disease, diabetes, obesity, even cancer. Experiencing trauma at any phase can be detrimental, but particularly in middle childhood, where there are a number of different really important developmental things going on, such as maybe primary among them, some could say, is developing one's sense of self. And then also emotional intelligence, EQ, is really developing there. And middle childhood children are also learning, that's where primary period where you're learning how to have interpersonal relationships beyond your family, i.e. friendships. And what else? And you also learn, I think our textbook was talking about this, use this term, you learn to define good, like doing good for yourself, like performance. You learn how to evaluate or have a concept of your performance ability and levels, both in academics and extracurricular stuff, sports and whatnot. So all of those factors of like really important developmental stuff going on can be deeply impacted by children that experience one or multiple potentially traumatic experiences. And those developmental impacts can have long-lasting effects. And then also neurobiologically, you're still forming tons of synapses in middle childhood. And traumatic events can definitely impede or just alter how those synapses are, being formed. In particular, in your fight-flight response, when your nervous system, something terrible just happened. So in the first moment, like your amygdala, the midbrain, I think, midbrain fires, amygdala fires and tells you, oh, something terrible's happened. So then if it's not a horrible event, you think it's like a potential could be something bad happen here. Then as a child, so like an 8-year-old, it's like, oh, something, I think something bad might have happened. But then if they end up being safe, if it's not too bad, then you're creating synapses with the prefrontal cortex that, and these two are communicating, the brain's communicating that, oh, you had this big, nervous system firing, but everything's okay, so we can calm down. And you create this connection between automatic explosion of your nervous system and your conscious, more human abilities to assess the situation, tell yourself it's okay. So when you have a traumatic experience with one, it can be buffered more easily. But if they're chronic or multiple, then that's that whole connection gets broken down, resulting in children that are constantly firing because they don't know when they're safe. So I'm seeing way over 3 to 5 minutes. So I guess I will wrap it up there. One final thing for resiliency, the number one best thing for resiliency to safeguard against long-lasting impacts from traumatic stress or traumatic events, and also to help in the healing process, is healthy relationships. And with middle childhood and children in general, it's been found that just having one single healthy caregiver relationship is incredibly powerful to mitigate the effects of a traumatic experience.